Welcome to another edition of the NSCF webinars. This is our first one in 2021, so compliments of the new season. We do hope that everyone is healthy and safe at the moment as we continue to experience the lockdown and this very scary wave 2. Today we are going to talk about the journey of the manual development. So first, I want to apologize that one of the panelists, Petro from ARC, is no longer able to join us in this webinar due to unforeseen circumstances. Able to join us today is Zama Mwilase, a technician in the mammal department at the DNSM Museum. The DNSM is the Durban Natural Science Museum, and it is the only natural science museum in South Africa falling under a local government, the eThekwini municipality. They are also home to the 100-plus-year-old near-complete dodo skeleton, which is said to be the second most complete specimen in the world, apart from the skeleton in Port Louis in Mauritius. So Zama curates and looks after the mammal collection. Among other things, some of her responsibilities are specimen preparation and processing, as well as maintaining the mammal collection spaces. She also handles all the mammal department loans, and she facilitates outreach program and behind-scenes tour. I happen to know that Zama plays as hard as she works. We are also joined by Nkosinathi Mazungula, the collection manager at SIAB. SIAB is the South African Institute for Aquatic Biodiversity, and they look after the national fish collection with over 1 million fish specimens, among other collections. So SIAB has a long and rich history of fish biodiversity research, and they are also a major resource for knowledge and understanding of the biodiversity and functioning of globally significant aquatic ecosystems. As a collection manager, Nkosinathi is in charge of managing all aspects of collection operations, ensuring that SIAB has good systems in place. This includes, but is not limited to, all the aspects of the occupational health and safety, the collection care, the access to the collections, as well as the security of the collections. He also manages and oversees all the financial transactions, budgeting and procurement processes related to the collections. So with those introductions out of the way, I'll now go ahead and share with you how the Collection Management Conservation Working Group fits in the NSCF network. And now that you have heard our long name, I will be referring to the working group as the CMC working group from now on. So the overall objective of the NSCF network is to ensure that collections in our institutions contribute through high quality research and data and also enrich sustainable life on Earth. It was for that reason that the DSI, which is the Department of Science and Technology, saw it fit to fund the project. So the CMC working group has a role to play to ensure that the objective is achieved. We look at the manual development, which is what the working group has done. So as a coordinator of the working group, my role was to figure out what the working group could collectively do to help achieve the network's objective, and then get the working group to do just that. But before I got employed, a few things had already been identified by the project lead and the coordinating committee, because they were already working behind scenes in a way. So the important requirements and necessary actions that they had in place that we were to try and do collectively as the network if we were to try to attain the objective. Amongst those things was the importance of securing collections and then make them accessible for research in healthy and safe environments. So that particular action has a lot to do with the managing of the collections, which is why it then made the development of the CMC manual become a priority for the CMC working group. Next slide, please. I would like us to familiarize ourselves with the webinar guidelines of engagement. So please keep your contributions helpful and considerate of the host and other participants. Say hello and let us know which institution you are from. And when you do use the chat box, remember to send to the panelists and everyone and not just to the panelists. Also do use the Q&A box to add questions regarding the panelist presentations. The panelists will be answering some of your questions live at the end of the webinar. And due to time constraints, we might not be able to answer all your questions during the webinar. However, answers will be provided to your questions at the webinar link afterwards. Next slide, please. So as have been mentioned earlier, that as the network, we are supposed to collectively ensure that the collections in our institutions contribute. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, okay.
Okay, so as have been mentioned earlier, that as the network, we are supposed to collectively ensure that collections in our institutions contribute through high quality research and data in addressing the issues. So the working group members, as can be seen in the slide, have contributed in securing the collections by developing the CMC manual with the common policies and standards, using existing documents that were kindly provided by the institutions at the beginning of the project, as well as also reviewing the global standards and best practices. This was done to ensure that everyone in the institution is on the same page with everything regarding managing the collection. As I have mentioned that the working group was collectively going to have to contribute to assist the entire network. So the working group fits in that they participated in putting the manual document together so that they are able to contribute to attaining the goal of the network objective. And this was done to ensure that all the institutions were on the same page with everything regarding managing the collections. If you can move to the next slide, please. Thank you, Chanel. Before announcing the date of our first national meeting, I had to prepare the meeting documents. In preparation for that, I imagined the life cycle of the collections in an institution. So that was right from when the specimens were acquired into the collections to when they were preserved, curated, and kept safe, then made accessible to all users for research, to even when they may eventually no longer be usable specimens for research and then they would have to be removed from the collection. Sometimes it would be they are removed just because they are downgraded to a status of being used as educational specimens. And in some instances, it would be because they were like completely being disposed of. So preparing the documents according to that life cycle gave birth to the chapters, as each of those documents got grouped according to what they covered. In the end, a CMC manual was developed. As it can be seen, it has 10 chapters, and the 4th chapter covers the data management aspects of the collection. And it was developed by the data working group coordinated by Ian. Then all the other chapters were developed by the CMC working group, with the exception of chapter 12, which was jointly done by Michelle and others. So if we adhere to the common standards that are in the manual, it will ensure that we secure our collections according to best practices that are recommended there. Also, the manual can be used as a guide when we evaluate the standards and policy implementations for managing our collections in the institution, so that we can see if this is making any difference. And once we are aware what our strengths and weaknesses are, as well as the risks in our collections, I feel like it will be easier to work towards attaining the objective of the NSCF network, as we will then be able to work to do the work that is required to resolve those issues that are in the way of us achieving that. So I just want to remind everyone that all the NSCF documents are developed in an open and transparent way, which is inclusive, to ensure that everyone's involvement is recognized by having institutions represented in all the NSCF structures. Those are some of the NSCF values. So in the case of this manual development, representations were made by the working group members in the national meetings. So now, the structure of the working group members and the composition. The working group members, the working group was made up of members from all the staff in the participating institution, as can be seen in the institution logos in the slide. With the exception of the Bolas Herbarium in UCT, as well as East London and McGregor museums, it was not always possible for institutions to have representations. So staff from the three institutions that could not be represented in the national meetings were able to attend regional meetings to catch up with what was discussed in the national meeting. And at a later stage, it was possible for some of them to be represented in the national working group. The working group member selections was based on whether there were collection staff in an institutions that were available to represent that institution in the national meeting. As I have mentioned earlier, some of the institutions did not have enough staff complement to have people sit in the working group. And it was for that reason that the regional meetings were then introduced. They were intended for the purpose of reaching everybody in the institution and for keeping the collection management dialogue going in between the national meetings, which were usually anything from 3 to 4 months apart. So the regional meetings were held both before and after the national meetings. Zama will be talking about the structure of the meeting in detail, so you'll hear about that a little later on in this webinar. The working group members were comprised of all collection-based staff, varying from collection managers to junior curators, as well as curators and collection technicians and collection attendants, loan officers, as well as a few scientists and collection preparators. So it was a very wide, varied group of people that were represented in the working groups. Next slide, please. So the working group member experiences varied also from 30 years plus of experience in the collection to 3 months experience of working in the collections. And so during the course of the manual, the working group structure was also a very fluid one, as some people left employment either due to retirement or just due to resignation. And in a couple of instances, it was also unfortunately due to them completely leaving the natural science profession. But at times, people just resigned so that they could alternate with other staff members from the institutions, as well as to join other NSCF structures. So next slide. It wasn't all doom and gloom, because also in the working group, new people were able to join. In some instances, people joined in when they had the working group, and then they identified how their institutions could benefit from being involved. And in some cases, people were sacrificing their time, even though there were staff shortages in their institutions. And yeah, sometimes whenever a working group representative was unable to attend, they'll send in a replacement from their institution. And now I am going to give over to Zama, who is going to take you through the structure of the meetings and how they were held, both at the regional and national level.
Audrey, for the introduction, I will talk about the structure and the of the national and regional working group meetings, as they formed a major part of the manual development process, where working group members are from different participating institutions are met to review, debate, and discuss the collections management documents. There were 3 national meetings every year from 2018 to last year, November 2020. The national meetings are when all participating institution representative members gather in one institution to discuss and review the prepared collection management documents. Next slide, please. The national meetings were held in different places throughout the country, as the institutions alternated the hosting of the meetings, as shown in the slide. Whenever an institution was hosting a meeting, they liaised with the coordinator for all meeting preparations. The alternated hosting was very important as it kept the meetings interesting, as working group members looked forward to the opportunity to visit new collections with each meeting. It also exposed the working group members to different ways of carrying out collection activities. For example, from prioritization of space usage to collection arrangements and so on. And another crucial role played by the visit to different institutions was for us as working group members to see that all institutions had similar challenges to deal with. It therefore encouraged us as working group members to jointly tackle or to solve those challenges, and this has proven very helpful. Next slide, please. The regional meetings are when institutions from the same province will meet before or after the national meeting to discuss the meeting documents, as well as to discuss what is in place in terms of collections management processes in their home institutions, and what still needs to be implemented with regards to the recommendation from the recommendations from the documents. The regional meetings were also alternated among participating institutions. Next slide, please. For the actual national meetings, the meeting pack with an agenda and all the documents that would be discussed during the meeting was circulated by email in advance and again a day before the meeting. The meetings usually lasted for 2 to 2.5 days. The meeting started from 7:30 to 5:30 and sometimes through to 6 o'clock, depending on when we finish reviewing the documents. There were two tea breaks and one lunch break. The last day was usually half day, and it usually ended at 1 o'clock or as soon as lunch had been served, as it was the day of departure. On the last day, we usually attended collection tours organized by the host institution. In regions where we had already seen the collections of the host institution, it was arranged to have collection tours of other institutions in the area. I will elaborate more on the tours later. Next slide, please. In the morning, we would kickstart the meeting with the check-ins, where each participating member is given an opportunity to introduce themselves and tell the meeting participants what they do in their respective institutions. Although the working group members knew each other early on, there were always new people in the meeting. Staff members from the hosting institutions were always invited to the meeting, and they did take advantage of the meeting being held in their institution. Sometimes there will be people standing in for working group members that weren't available. Check-ins were intended to allow participants to share whatever is on their minds, whether related to the meeting or not. They were done by everyone present in the meeting. That is, if they were willing to, and no one was forced to do check-ins. Working group members were asked to say something purposefully to set the direction of the meeting and to give each member an opportunity to speak during the meeting, just to break the ice, so that it became easier for members to contribute their knowledge as the meeting progressed. The coordinator would put up a slide with a set of check-in prompts for that day that working group members could choose from, as shown in the slide. Members were allowed to go through as many or as little prompts as they were able to. The prompts always started with gratitude. And during the initial stages of the working group meetings, some of the working group members dreaded check-ins, including myself on that note, especially members who are not used to speaking in front of people or speaking in front of large crowds, because the prompts challenged you to think and speak early in the morning, and they made you get out of your comfort zone and think on the spot. But we eventually got used to the check-ins, and some of us have come to love them. The meetings were always closed with check-outs. Following the check-ins, the working group members gave institution feedback according to regions. This could be input on the documents to be discussed or related questions, updates on what has been happening in their home institutions, any and all collection management related challenges, updates on new staff members, new equipment they've bought, and so on. Once the reporting back was done, collections management discussions will begin, and we will start reviewing the documents for that day. Kosinati will elaborate more on how the documents were reviewed, as well as how the feedback was made in the institutions following national meetings. Next slide, please. Since the COVID-19 restrictions and recommendations that have been put in place by the government, both national and regional meetings have been conducted virtually via Zoom. The COVID-19 restrictions impacted on the reviewing of the manual chapters by the network, as this took place in March 2020 and was due to be concluded late in April 2020. Not everybody was prepared or set up to virtually work from home. Next slide, please. To date, the working group has been able to attend collection tours at the institutions that are listed on the slide. During the collection tours, the working group members would get an opportunity to see and learn about collections that are kept by the host institution, to be exposed to new collection management strategies, to learn from other institutions, from each other as institutions, in order to improve the way we carry out collection management activities. The collection tours served as one of the working group programs to grow network connections and to do away with the culture of working in silos. As for me, I personally really enjoyed the tours because I got exposed to a lot of things that I have never seen before in collections, like the collection compactors in Ditong Museum in the Lepidoptera department and the National Museum's mammal department. I was happy to see how well other institutions keep their collections, how they are organized and arrange them. I was able to compare my own institution and see where our shortfalls were. It also made me see where our institution was doing very well, and we were able to share that experience with the working group members when we hosted one of the national meetings. One of the experiences that we shared with the working group was the demonstration of the use of fire extinguishers to the working group members. They got an opportunity to extinguish a fire using 4 steps of the PASS fire extinguisher technique, which is to pull, aim, squeeze, and sweep to extinguish the fire. Some people shared that they hadn't used a fire extinguisher before, even though they have fire extinguishers in their institutions, and that they hadn't had fire drills in their institutions. This made me to be very grateful of my institution because we as the Durban Natural Science Museum have a well-established health and safety department through council. It was also interesting to see the advanced extractor system in the wet collection spaces at SIAP, where the sensors for ethanol and formalin are attached to the extractor system. In case the concentration of ethanol or formalin fumes are high in the air, the sensors will be triggered and then they will trigger the extractor system to extract all the fumes in the air. I was also biasly interested and enjoyed visiting the mammal departments during the tours, as this is my area of work. I found the Bloemfontein's National Museum mammal collection quite impressive. The technicians there showed me their whole process of skinning specimens, and honestly, I would like to go there for a day or two for an advanced training in skinning mammal specimens, because those guys who work there have been there for a very long time and they have more experience, skinning experience than me. I also visited the mammal department at Dizong Museum, where I was thrilled to see that they use flesh-eating beetles to clean their skulls. They explained how they keep the beetle colony alive when they need to use them. This was interesting to me because as much as I know and have seen videos of this method of processing skulls, it was interesting to finally see the actual skulls that have been processed by this method. I have never used it in processing skulls as I usually clean the skulls manually, which is also effective. Next slide, please. The working group meetings structure gave everyone an opportunity to speak and contribute their knowledge. One major thing I have learned throughout this manual development process is that everyone has something to contribute. No matter how small you think it is, it's important and it fits somewhere in the process. There was a culture of respect towards working group members during discussions. No opinions were undermined. The working group members did not talk over each other. Everyone's point of view was respected and taken seriously. No one was made to feel uncomfortable for sharing their opinions and their point of view. It was a happy and a professional environment, and everyone was looking forward to the next meeting. Sometimes there would be differences in opinions among working group members, but this was also conducted in a respectable manner. I was also happy that even the junior staff members like myself were intensely involved in this process from the beginning. We have acquired skills and experience we didn't have before. With the manual implementation underway, the working group members will hopefully be able to contribute and assist other task team members with the implementation process. Next slide, please. Being part of the collection management and conservation working group has really helped me and most working group members to understand collections management guidelines and standards, as well as the importance of compliance. The experience that I have gained from the working group meetings has been very beneficial and has helped me improve a lot, both on a professional and a personal level. Had it not been for my involvement in the manual development process, I doubt I would have been brave enough to sit here today as a panelist. The experience helped me to develop working relationships with other working group members, as I can contact them anytime and ask anything relating to collections management. And being part of the working group also gave me an opportunity to attend the 2018 annual Spinach Conference, which was held in New Zealand, Dunedin. This was my first international conference and trip, and now I can tell you what a jet lag feels like because I have experienced my first. I learned a lot from that conference through museum collection tours around Dunedin, as well as from the presentations that were given on how collections and data management practices grow and improve every day due to the changes that are happening on planet Earth, as well as the new technology developments that are happening around the world on a daily basis. I was also able to give a talk and it was my first presentation on an international platform. I experienced many of my firsts during this manual development process and grew a lot from being a working group member. Thank you for affording me and every working group member the opportunity to contribute in the attainment of the NSCF network objective. And yeah, I left no stone unturned sharing my experiences. And I will now hand over to Ngosinati to take you through the process of document development and reviewing. Thank you.
On a point of personal privilege, I would love to extend flapping accolades and exceeding gratitude to our working group coordinator, Ms. Badrindaba, for a job well done. You know, in societal cycles, they say everything rises and falls on leadership. I know she has thanked us in the last NSCF webinar, you know, for a job well done as the working group, but I think it's befitting, appropriate, and apparent that we need to say job well done to her as well. You know, but that is not the responsibility for me to talk this morning. Next slide, please. So, ladies and gentlemen, I will be taking you through the process of developing and reviewing the SMC document. So the manual was developed through an intense process of input and reviewing of documents. Just before the national meeting, I'm trying to move just before the national meeting, what the working group coordinator would do would be to draft the documents and then send them through to Michelle. If and when they are approved, they would be sent to the working group committee, to the working group. This was done well in advance so that the working group members can have plenty of time to prepare so that they can give meaningful contribution when they get to the national working group. So during the national working groups, so all the working group members would meet and discuss giving input to the documents. As Zama has already apprised and told us that sometimes it would be about 2 to 3 days of intense discussions discussing the manual. So after the national meeting, so what the working group coordinator would do would be to amend and consolidate all the inputs, edits and suggestions to the documents, and then send it back to the working group, as well as minutes with the required actions from the working groups. Actions like the formation of regional committee meetings where national feedback would be given. So the latest versions of the documents would then be shared with Michelle. That is now the project lead. I just want to pause here and speak a little bit about the access policy, you know, because there was some bones of contention as it relates to it. Michelle had to present it to the NSCF Coordinating Committee. The NSCF Coordinating Committee is a committee comprised of managing directors of participating institutions. Even though I'm not a managed director, but I sit in that committee as well. So the policy was reviewed there, and Michelle amended and then sent it back to the coordinating committee, and until it was eventually approved. I remember it was around this time that someone reported us to Michelle because they felt aggrieved that they did not get all the specimens that they requested from SAIP. I also would like to mention that not all documents were taken to the coordinating committee, as that would have been time consuming, and yeah. So, but be that as it may, all key issues which are major policy commitments were highlighted for their attention in their coordinating committee meetings. One thing that I think I need to mention here, there was a deadline from DSI. They said they wanted to see an access policy document which is signed by all participating institutions. That's why it was discussed here. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to be talking to you about the feedback from working group members. So working group members, once they get back to their home institution, had the responsibility to reach out to non-working group members. So they use various methods to give national feedback and also to receive input from non-working group members. Some institutions had already existing collections management discussion structures, which were used then for this purpose to give feedback. One such example is the Collections Advisory Group meeting, Collections Advisory Group CAG at SIAP, which meets last Friday of each month, where we discuss and share advice on collections operations. So other institutions, they had a similar, they constructed a working group similar to the national working group, where all collection staff were involved. So all the documents and communications from the NSCF would be uploaded on the public drive so that everyone can have access, and whenever they have time, they can make their contribution. So other institutions had a dedicated email which would disseminate all information and working documents to all staff. You know, even if someone missed a scheduled meeting, they can have time to go and work and make their contribution, because we wanted everyone's input to the documents. So other institutions, Audrey has already mentioned that there were institutions that were not represented in the national working group, but so they were not left behind as well, because they could catch up on the regional meetings. So after all this, the working group representatives will then forward all the input from non-working group members to the working group coordinator, who would then amend the documents and put them and send them back to the working group via emails and having a link on Google Docs. So after the last editions, documents would then be saved as final documents, which would then form part of the collection management manual chapters that was being developed. Next slide, please. So the chapter documents then were reviewed by the entire network through a chapter task teams that were formed either according to individuals' interest, experience or relation to duties at work. So the coordinator would then amend the network input and pass those chapters to the project lead for review. So after that, the completed manual then was shared with the NSCF coordinating committee so that they can review it as well, after which it was sent to the publishers. Next slide, please. I'll be talking to you now about what it took to develop the manual, the travel tales, what happened. I feel like I need to be Trevor Noah to really narrate this bit of the presentation, because there was drama each time we were traveling. So from people losing their luggage, some leaving their luggages and going to Pretoria, as if it's going to mysteriously follow you in Pretoria. Sometimes people would be in Pretoria or wherever we're having the national meeting without their luggages, sometimes being reunited with their luggages on the last day of the meeting. And sometimes, the OR Tambo is intimidating for us rural folks, from this side. So people will get lost. You'll find that some people were, ended up on international arrivals waiting for shuttle picks up. There was drama each time, shout out to Chanel and Ungwelekazi, for holding things together. So all in all, attending the meetings took some getting used to. Some people were even leaving their travel documents, because you don't need to have travel documents when you take a taxi to Josa location. So it took some getting used to. Some people have had minor mistakes, like relying on Gautrain, and then you find out on the day that the Gautrain was not operational. There was drama. But I guess everyone can tell now that I am not Trevor Noah. I am Daniel Nkosinathi Mazungu. Next slide, please. as Zama has already mentioned, you know, that in this process, we learned a lot. We grown through the process. And when I look back now, 13 years ago, you know, as a freshwater when I look 13 years ago, when I joined the World of Natural Science Collections as an intern at Albany Museum, you know, I think now I sit with much better understanding of when it comes to, you know, managing collections. And being involved in the working groups also ensured that we have better understanding of the legislation applicable to our line of work too, and not just, you know, collection management techniques. For instance, for instance, keeping an accession register, you know, it's a requirement by CITES and SAMA, but it's a very controversial and less understood requirement that was put together, of course, for a valid reason. I think the controversy around it, you know, is due to lack of clarity or understanding as to why we should keep, you know, such. It really appears as a redundant exercise, you know, especially now at this day and age, you know, but it's a requirement that needs to be followed. I also learned a lot from others, you know, when you go on collection tours, it opens up your mind to think about things that you never thought, dreamed, or imagined, especially about your collections. You know, I remember one time we came back from the National Committee meeting, from the National Working Group meeting, yeah, and we were so energized. We reached out to the Department of Labor. We got an official to come. We gave her a tour of the collection, you know, so that she can advise us on aspects of occupational health and safety. But then they were issued with a notice. But that did not deter us to trying to better our operations. You know, so I sit in more than one structure of the NSCF, and I think I've hugely benefited from the sessions with Eels and Des, you know, and that has helped in my leadership role as in the collections division platform of SCIP. Next slide, please. You see, I think the skills that I have gained, you know, throughout the process of developing this manual, I think they will continue to play a significant role wherever my career takes me. Not as if I'm going to leave the institute anytime soon. I think I will retire here at 65, maybe as managing director of SCIP. From that said, I think I'm going to give over to the working group coordinator, you know, to wrap things up.
Thanks, Zama and Kosnati, for sharing your experiences for being the panelist in the webinar. It's hard to believe for me that it's been 3 years since the first meeting, and here we are 325 pages later. And I think developing this manual was an opportunity for the staff from the participating institutions in the network to pull in their knowledge and experiences to work collaboratively. So I'd like to take this opportunity now to thank every one of you for being able to join us today. And I would also like to take the opportunity to apologize for the poor connection on my end. There's just so much of lagging. It's just saying your internet is unstable the entire time. But now we are going to take questions if you guys have any questions for us. Thank you.
And we have been, there we have a question from Ataboro. When has the project started?
In 2016, 2017, but that was behind scenes work that was mostly done by Michelle and later on joined by some of the people that were appointed to be in the coordinating committee, which is the representatives of the managing directors, as Kosnati has mentioned during his section of the talk. So I'm not sure if you were already in the institution, but I think you might have been in 2017 when we went to the forum in the Drakensberg. And then the NSCF hub staff was officially employed at the beginning of 2018, which is when we got employed. But the project had already been operational only behind the scenes. I'm not sure if I'm answering the question you were asking, Matabaro.
Audrey, there's a question on the Q&A box from Mandy. She says, what happens after the manual implementation?
Happens after the manual implementation. So what happens after the manual and exercises the institutions to identify where we are good or where we have shortfalls, and then started working towards that. And why will we be doing that? As I mentioned earlier, to try and attain that objective of having those collections that we keep answering this these issues and having the high quality research and high quality data, which will be useful. So we just manage our collections the way we should be managing them. We just be better versions of our institutions. We'll be more knowledgeable and we'll be adhering to standards. And yeah, that is the goal, which means then our data will be more credible and will be used by everyone who cares to use the data. And yeah.
Question from Alex Holland.
I see Alex is asking when we can hold the actual manual in our hands. Hopefully, okay, the link is there.
Oh dear, seems like we lost Audrey. So Alex, we're very close to it. We're hoping at the latest in February. So it is with the publishers now, and we're doing the last edits. And yeah, so by end February. Is that right, Audrey? By end February?
Yes, it will actually be a week before the end of February, but we, to be on the safe side, suggested end of February. So we hope everyone is going to be able to use that manual and enjoy it as much as the working group members enjoyed developing it. And yeah, I can't believe it's been 3 years. I just literally remember the first meeting and me having that timeline and just putting the life cycle of the specimens, and later realizing these are going to be the chapters of the manual, because this one covers all the aspects of acquiring and what is required if you are acquiring specimens, this, then I would develop those documents. And the specimens are now in the institutions. How do I look after the specimens? This should be in place, and then those documents would be developed. And yeah, it feels so surreal. It just feels so surreal. If people do think of anything, they could always use the link below, and we will timelessly respond to the questions that will be shared in the comments. And once again, I'd like to thank everyone for taking their time to come and join us today, and compliments of the season.